Warning, this podcast contains descriptions of murder, torture and abuse. As a result, it may not be suitable for everybody. Bristol, a city and a county in the southwest of England with a population just under 500,000 people. The Bristol district has the 10th largest population in England. Iron Age forts and Roman villas were built near the confluence of the rivers Frome and Avon around the beginning of the 11th century. But how was the Bristol waters sullied by the baby farmer Amelia Dyer? Christmas ruined by the murder of Yoanna Yeates, and the schoolgirl Becky Watts, whose death shocked the city and the nation. Amelia Dyer was one of the most prolific serial killers in history, murdering infants in her care over a 30-year period. She trained as a nurse and was widowed in 1869. She turned to baby farming, the practice of adopted unwanted infants in exchange for money to support herself. She initially cared for the children legitimately, in addition to having two of her own. Whether intentionally or not, a number of them died in her care. This led to convictions of neglect and 6 months hard labour. She then began directly murdering children she had adopted, strangling at least some of them, and disposed of their bodies to avoid attention. She was mentally unstable and was committed to several mental asylums throughout her life, despite suspicions of feigning, and survived at least one serious suicide attempt. Dyer was keen to make money from baby farming, and alongside taking in expectant women, she advertised to nurse and adopt a baby in return for a substantial one-off payment and adequate clothing for the child. In her advertisements and meetings with clients, she assured them that she was respectable and married, and that she would provide a safe and loving home for the child. In 1872, Amelia married William Dyer, a brewer's labourer from Bristol. They had 2 children together, Mary Ann, also known as Polly, and William Samuel. Amelia eventually left her husband. For some time, Dyer eluded the resulting interest of the police. She was eventually caught in 1879 after a doctor was suspicious about the number of child deaths he had been called to certify in Dyer's care. However, instead of being convicted of murder or manslaughter, she was sentenced to 6 months hard labour for neglect. The experience allegedly almost destroyed her mentally, though others have expressed incredibility at the leniency of the sentence when compared to those handed out for lesser crimes. Upon her release, she resumed her nursing career. She returned to baby farming and murder shortly afterwards. Dyer realised the folly of involving doctors to issue death certificates and began disposing of the bodies herself. Her and her family frequently relocated to different towns and cities to escape suspicion, regain anonymity and acquire new businesses. Over the years, Dyer used a succession of aliases. In 1893, Dyer was discharged from a final committal at the Somerset and Bath Lunatic Asylum near Wells. 2 years later, Dyer moved to Caversham, Berkshire, accompanied by an unsuspecting associate, Jane Granny Smith, who Dyer had recruited from a brief spell in the workhouse and Dyer's daughter and son-in-law Mary Ann, also known as Polly, and Arthur Palmer. This was followed by a move to 45 Kensington Road, Reading, Berkshire, later that year. Smith was persuaded by Dyer to be referred to as mother in front of innocent women handing over their children. This was in effect to present a caring mother-daughter image. On the 30th of March 1896, a package was retrieved from the Thames at Reading by a bargeman. The package Dyer dumped was not weighted adequately and been easily spotted. It contained the body of a baby girl, later identified as Helena Frey. In the small detective force of Addington Reading Borough Police, Detective Constable Anderson made a crucial breakthrough. As well as finding a label from Templemead Station, Bristol, he used a microscopic analysis of the writing paper and deciphered a legible name, Mrs. Thomas, and an address. This evidence led the police to Dyer, but still had no strong evidence to connect her directly with a serious crime. They were able to glean additional evidence from witnesses and information obtained from Bristol Police. This served to increase concerns, and DC Anderson, with Sergeant James, placed Dyer's home under surveillance. Further intelligence suggested that Dyer would abscond if she came at all under suspicion. Officers decided to use a young woman as a decoy, hoping she'd be able to secure a meeting with Dyer to discuss her services. It transpired that Dyer was expecting her new client to call, but instead she found detectives waiting on the doorstep. On the 3rd of April, the police raided her home. The stench of human decomposition could be found in the home. Other evidence relating, including white edging tape, telegrams, adoption arrangement, pawn tickets for children's clothes, and receipts for Edmondsons and letters were also found. Police calculated that no fewer than 20 children had been placed in the care of Mrs. Thomas, now revealed to be Amelia Dyer. She had also about to be moved home again, this time to Somerset. Dyer was arrested on the 4th of April and charged with murder. Her son-in-law Arthur Palmer was charged as an accessory. During April, the Thames was dredged and 6 more bodies were discovered, including Doris Maymorn, Harry Simmons, which was Dyer's last victim. Each baby was strangled with a white tape, which was later told by the police was how they could tell it was one of hers. 11 days after handing her daughter to Dyer, Olivia Maymorn, whose name had been merged as items kept by Dyer, identified her daughter's remains. On the 22nd of May 1896, Dyer appeared at the Old Bailey and pleaded guilty to 1 murder. The only defence Dyer offered was insanity, as she'd been committed twice to asylums in Bristol. It took the jury only 4.5 minutes to find her guilty. On the eve of her execution, Dyer heard that the charges against Polly had been dropped. Dyer was hanged by James Billington at Newgate Prison on Wednesday the 10th of June 1896. When asked on the scaffold if she had anything to say, she said, quote, "I have nothing to say," end quote, just before being dropped at 9 a.m. precisely. Yoanna Yeates was a landscape architect from Hampshire, England, who went missing on the 17th of December 2010 in Bristol after an evening out with colleagues. Following a highly publicised appeal for information on her whereabouts and intense police inquiries, her body was discovered on the 25th of December 2010. A post-mortem examination determined she'd been strangled. The murder inquiry was one of the largest police investigations ever undertaken in the Bristol area. The case dominated news coverage in the United Kingdom around the Christmas period as Yeates' family fought out assistance from the public through social networking services and press conferences. Rewards up to £60,000 were offered for information leading to those responsible for Yeates' death. The police initially suspected and arrested Christopher Jeffries, Yeates' landlord, who lived in a flat in the same building. He was subsequently released without charge. Vincent Tabak, a 32-year-old Dutch engineer and neighbour of Yeates, was arrested on the 20th of January 2011. Media attention at the time centred on a filming of a reenactment of a disappearance for the BBC's programme Crime Watch. After 2 days of questioning, Tabak was charged on the 22nd of January 2011 with Yeates' murder. On the 5th of May 2011, he pleaded guilty to Yeates' manslaughter but denied murdering her. His trial started on the 4th of October 2011. He was found guilty on the 20th of October 2011 and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. At approximately 8 p.m. on 19th of December 2010, Yeates' boyfriend, Greg Reardon, returned home from a weekend visit to Sheffield to find Yeates absent from their flat on Carnage Road, Clifton. He had been trying to contact her by phone and text but without success. Whilst waiting for his return, Reardon called her again, but her mobile phone rang from the pocket of her coat, which was still in the flat. He found her purse and keys also, and their cat appeared to have been neglected. Shortly after midnight, Reardon contacted the police and Yeates' parents to report her missing. Investigators determined Yeates had spent the evening of the 17th of December 2010 with colleagues at the Bristol Ram pub on Park Street, leaving at around 8 p.m. to begin the 30-minute walk home. She told friends and colleagues she was not looking forward to spending the weekend alone, as it would be her first in the flat without Reardon. She planned to spend the time baking in preparation for a party the couple would be throwing the following week and shopping for Christmas. Yeates was seen on the closed-circuit television at 8:10 p.m. leaving a Waitrose supermarket without purchasing anything. She phoned her best friend, Rebecca Scott, at 8:30 to arrange a meeting on Christmas Eve. The last known footage of Yeates recorded her buying a pizza from a branch of Tesco's Express at around 8:40 p.m. She had bought 2 small bottles of cider at nearby off-licence bargain booths. Reardon and Yeates' friends set up a website and used social media to help look for her. On the 21st of December 2010, Yeates' parents and Reardon made a public appeal for a safe return at a police press conference. In another press conference, broadcast live on the 23rd of December 2010, Yeates' father commented on her disappearance. Quote, "I think she was abducted." After getting home to her flat, "I have no idea of the circumstances of the abduction because of what was left behind. I feel sure she would not have gone out by herself, leaving all those things behind. She was taken away somewhere. Her keys, phone, purse and coat were left behind at her flat." End quote. Detectives retrieved a receipt for a pizza but found no sign of it or its packaging. Both bottles of cider were found in the flat, one of them partially consumed. There was no evidence of forced entry or a struggle. Police began to examine the possibility that Yeates may have known her abductor. On the 25th December 2010, a fully clothed body was found in the snow by a couple walking their dogs along Longwood Lane near a golf course next to the entrance of the quarry in Fairland, approximately 3 miles from her home. The body was identified as Yeates. Reardon and the Yeates family visited the site of the discovery on the 27th of December. Davy Yates said that his family, quote, had been told to prepare for the worst, end quote, and expressed relief his daughter's body had been recovered. The investigation, called Operation Braid, comprised 80 detectives and civilian staff under the direction of Detective Chief Inspector Phil Jones, a senior officer with the Avon and Somerset Constabulary Major Crimes Investigation Unit. It became one of the largest police operations in the constabulary's history. Following the discovery of Yates's body, detectives from Avon and Somerset Constabulary issued an appeal for anyone with information about the death to come forward. A post-mortem examination began on the 26th of December 2010, though results were delayed due to the frozen condition of the body. Police initially thought it was possible Yates had frozen to death because her body showed no visible signs of injury. On the 28th of December, investigators announced that the case had become a murder inquiry as the pathologist who performed an autopsy determined that Yates had died as a result of strangulation. A young woman attending a party at a neighbouring house on Carnegie Road on the night of Yates' disappearance recorded hearing two loud screams shortly after 9 p.m. coming from the direction of Yates' flat. Another neighbour who lived behind Yates' home said he had heard a woman scream, quote, "Help me," end quote, though he could not recall exactly where the incident had occurred. Senior officers from the investigation asked for assistance from the National Policy Improvement Agency, which provided expertise for the difficult cases. On the 4th of January 2011, a clinical forensic psychologist who had previously been involved as a criminal profiler and in other high-profile murder cases joined the investigation. Police launched a national advertising campaign to appeal for witnesses through Facebook. Shortly after 7 a.m. on the 30th of December 2010, Christopher Jeffries, Yates' landlord who lived in the same building, was arrested on suspicion of her murder. He was taken to the local police station for questioning. On 4th of March 2011, police released him from bail and stated that he was no longer a suspect. He subsequently won an undisclosed sum in libel damages for defamatory news articles published following his arrest, and received an apology from the Avon and Somerset Police for any distress caused in him during the investigation. On the morning of the 20th of January, the Avon and Somerset Constabulary arrested 32-year-old engineer Vincent Tabak, who lived with his girlfriend in the flat next to Yates. Authorities declined to reveal additional details while the suspect was being interrogated due to concerns over controversial media coverage of Jeffries' former arrest. The arrest of Tabak followed an anonymous tip from a female caller shortly after a televised appeal by Yates' parents on Crime Watch. Investigators also searched the nearby townhouse of a friend where Tabak was believed to have been staying about a mile away. He had previously been ruled out as a suspect during an earlier stage of the investigation and had returned to Britain from a holiday visit to his family in the Netherlands. After questioning during 96 hours of detention, Tabak was charged on the 22nd of January 2011 with the murder of Yoanna Yeates. He made a brief appearance at Bristol's Magistrate Court on the 24th of January and was remanded in custody. Tabak initially maintained he was not responsible for Yoanna Yeates' death, claiming that DNA evidence linking him to the crime had been fabricated by corrupt officials. However, on the 8th of February, he told Peter Brotherton, a prison chaplain, that he had killed her and intended to plead guilty. On the 5th of May 2011, Vincent Tabak pleaded guilty to manslaughter but denied murdering Yoanna Yeates. The plea of guilty to manslaughter was rejected by the Crown Prosecution Service. On the 20th of September, Tabak appeared in prison at a pre-trial hearing at Bristol Crown Court. Tabak claimed the killing was not sexually motivated and told the court he killed Yeates while trying to silence her after she screamed as he tried to kiss her. He claimed she had made a flirty comment inviting him to a drink with her. The jury was sent out to deliberate on the 26th of October and returned with a verdict of 2 days later. On the 28th of October 2011, Tabak was found guilty of murder by a 10-2 majority verdict. He was jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years. Passing sentence, Mr. Justice Field referred to a sexual element to the killing. Rebecca Marie Becky Watts was a British student from Bristol who was murdered in 2015 at the age of 16. In November 2015, her stepbrother Nathan Matthews was found guilty of her murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years, and his girlfriend Yoanna Yeates was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 17 years. Both Matthews and Yeates was also convicted of conspiracy to kidnap, preventing the unlawful burial of a body and perverting the course of justice. They were also convicted of possession of 2 stun guns. Becky Watts was last seen at home in St George, Bristol, on the morning of the 19th of February 2015 by her stepmother Angie Galsworthy, a multiple sclerosis sufferer who left the house at around 11:15 for a hospital appointment. Watts was reported missing at around 4 p.m. the following day. Investigators found that her phone, laptop and tablet computer were missing from the house, though she had not taken any money or spare clothes with her and did not tell anybody where she was going. On the 22nd of February, Avon and Somerset police made their first appeal for information about her disappearance. The following day, her father and grandmother appeared at the press conference appealing for her return. An online campaign using the hashtag Find Becky was launched on social media, reaching more than 2 million people worldwide. Police searches focused on a number of properties in Barton Hill, South Mead, St George's Park and Troopers Hill Nature Reserve. In addition, searches were made in nearby open spaces and park areas, as well as house-to-house inquiries. Searches was also organised by public volunteers in areas including Wharf Road fish ponds, Tyne Valley and Baddocks Wood. Police made a public appeal for information regarding the movements of Black Vauxhall Superior between the 19th and the 23rd of February. Initial inquiries focused on the belief that Watts had disappeared after leaving her family home, based on statements given by her stepbrother Nathan Matthews and his girlfriend Yoanna Yeates, who were at the house at the time. They said they had not seen Watts but heard the door slam and assumed she had left. On the 28th of February, Matthews and Yeates was arrested in connection with Watts' disappearance. On the 2nd of March, they had been rearrested on suspicion of murder. The following day, Watts' dismembered body was found at a property in Barton Hill. On March the 4th, Matthews was charged with murder. On the 6th, 4 other people had been arrested and were charged with assisting an offender, having been accused of helping to hide or dispose of Watts' body. On the 22nd of June, Yeates, who was originally charged with preventing the course of justice, was charged with murder. A 23-year-old man had also been arrested but released without charge. Matthews and Yeates was also charged with conspiracy to kidnap, preventing the lawful burial of a body and possession of a illegal weapon. The The couple were also charged with 4 unrelated counts of making indecent images of children. Matthews was also charged on unrelated counts of sexual assault and voyeurism. Watts' funeral took place at St Ambridge Church, Whitehall, Bristol on the 17th of April 2015 and was described by her family as an occasion to celebrate Becky's life. The murder trial began on the 6th of October 2015 at Bristol Crown Court. It was the prosecution's case that Watts was suffocated in her bedroom during a sexually motivated kidnap plot carried out by Matthews and Hall. According to the prosecution, after the killing, Matthews and Hall put Watts' body into the boot of their car and stayed at their home for several more hours, during which time other family members arrived at home. Later that day, they drove back to their own house, where over the next few days they dismembered her body using a knife and circular saw and put the remains into bags and boxes, which were then hidden in a neighbour's shed. Matthews admitted killing Watts but denied committing murder. He instead admitted manslaughter, telling the court he tried to kidnap his stepsister as a way of scaring her into changing what he perceived as her bad behaviour, but the plan went wrong and he accidentally killed her. Matthews insisted the killing took place while Hall was in the garden and that she was not involved. She denied the murder, and she said she had no knowledge of the murder and had played no part in it, describing text messages she exchanged with Matthews about kidnapping schoolgirls in the months before as unfortunate and sarcastic. The prosecution claimed that the text message between the two, as well as other contact found at their homes, suggested a shared unnatural interest in attractive teenage females. On the 13th of November 2015, Mr. Justin Digmans sentenced Matthews to life imprisonment with a minimum term of over 30 years and Hall with 17 years in prison. In his sentencing remarks, the judge agreed with the prosecution's belief the planned kidnap was for sexual purposes, telling Matthews he had a fixation with having sex with petite teenage girls, and that he believed Hall had been persuaded to participate in this fixation. He added, "Finally, I'd like to pay a public tribute to the family of Becky for the dignified way in which they conducted themselves throughout these proceedings," and then continued, "Hearing the evidence during the trial had been difficult for anyone, but it is plain it has been an immense burden for the family." Matthews and Hall lodged appeals against their convictions and sentences, but on the 23rd of June 2016, the Court of Appeal rejected their applications, saying that there was, quote, "no reasonable argument that the convictions were unsafe or the sentences were wrong in principle or manifestly excessive." Thank you for everybody who's listened to this episode. This episode has been researched, written and hosted by me, Andrew Knight. Sound, music and editing has been provided by Harry Edmondson. Make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere where you listen to your podcast. This allows the episode to be downloaded automatically as soon as it's released. Please reach out to us on the social media. We're at Hometown Murders on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. Please support the show by leaving a 5-star rating or a review. It really does help.